Good morning.
Hi, Alex.
Hey. All right, everyone who's joining, we're just going to give everyone a few minutes to come on board. Dominica, welcome and thank you for joining our little book club. We're excited to ask you some questions and see where the discussion takes us. For everyone who's joining, you're welcome to add more questions throughout the AMA today. Feel free to go throw them into the Slack channel or right here in Zoom via the Q&A. We'll get through as many of them as we can. And if we have leftover questions that we weren't able to get to, we might send them over to Dominica later and see if she can answer a few of them just via text. All right, Dominica, I think we've got most people joining here, and we'll just start with kind of a nice, easy question to get us into the groove. Maybe you could just tell us briefly why you wrote Making Work Visible.
Originally, Making Work Visible started out, it was just going to be something to hand out in the workshops that I was doing. I was doing these Kanban for DevOps, ops, and IT ops workshops, and people were expecting, or one of the feedback items I always received was, is there a handout? Because I had a big long deck, and I'd say, well, I'll give you a copy of the deck. But they really wanted sort of a workbook. So I started working on this workbook that would accompany this 2-day workshop that I was doing. And then people started asking me, well, where's the book on this? And there really wasn't at that time, back in 2012, 2013, 2014. There were a lot of books coming out on Kanban that were geared for development and engineering, but not so much on IT ops. And so I thought, okay, I need to write a book on this. And that's how it started. So there were several iterations of it, from being a very small sort of handout in a workshop, and it just grew and grew until it became the book it is when it was published in 2017.
Wow, 2017. Didn't realize it was so long ago now. Still one of our most popular books, though. All right, so I'm going to start now with a question from over in Slack from one of the book clubbers. So since publishing Making Work Visible, how has your methodology evolved?
Well, I think the focus has evolved to be more broad. Originally, Making Work Visible, it was really geared initially for people in IT ops, because that's my background. I used to be a build engineer, and I spent much of my career doing configuration management and release management, and being this sort of coordinator in many ways between engineering and IT ops. So that's where the focus was. But I think in order to really affect change, we need to equip practitioners with a way to influence their boss, influence their boss's boss, and provide, become the voice of reason in their organization where they can, to influence the bringing together of business leadership and technology leadership, and really looking at how can we start to influence OKRs, because that's how people are measured. So it's just gotten more broader to really help the practitioners of the world, the people with their hands on the keyboard who are doing the work that everybody relies on. How can we help these people not be overloaded at 100% capacity utilization, so that they can contribute at the same time that they can experience a level of mastery for what they're doing, instead of having so much whip that they're just onslaught of too much whip, and you're just rushing to get things done, and it feels like the quality is just not where you can be proud of it.
Yeah. We all want to be past that place, right? All right. Another question from the same gentleman, P, over in Book Club. Since publishing Making Work Visible, also, have you noticed any new time thieves, or do you feel
Uh-huh.
is everything still kind of those five still cover everything?
I'm amazed at how the 5 thieves of time that I wrote about in Making Work Visible are still very valid today. But I have considered, I have experienced myself the idea of a fifth time thief. I have told myself in the past, if there were another time thief, what would it be? And for me, it would be time thief. I can't find that thing. I cannot, how much time. I spend a lot of time looking for stuff. And maybe I'm just disorganized, but I hear others experiencing and observing the same thing. Was this in an email? Which of my emails was it in? Which Slack channel was it in? Not just within, Task Talk, the company I work for, but which of the 12 Slack instances could it have been in? And, was this in a Dropbox? Was this in a Google Drive? I mean, and because the rate of change is faster and faster and faster, and there's so many more new tools that we need to learn quickly. For me, a big time killer has been just finding stuff. And I'm really curious if you're on the call, if you could +1 or something. I don't have the chat open, but or if there's a way that
There's a polling function. I'll throw it in there.
Yeah, where did I put that? If you are in the same boat, I'd like to hear about that. Or if you have another idea for a time thief, curious what your thoughts are there.
Where did I put that time thief? I like that. I feel like if you draw him, it's gonna need to have like his glasses like on top of his head. Where are they? Well, I get that poll up. Let me get you started on the next question.
Okay.
So this is from Justin. In my corporate culture, any conversation with leadership about time and team capacity ultimately devolves into the classic optimize for resource utilization. In your experience, what data or visuals best keep the discussion focused on the work and flow?
Yeah. We hear that a lot. And I find that talking about it hasn't been real useful, but that images have, because when we see an image, the brain is trying to understand what's going on here. What is the pattern here? What does this really mean? And so some of the images that I've seen to be most effective to get the conversation going about 100% capacity utilization or resource utilization is to look at, so some metrics that we have, you can see, for example, in your flow time metrics or your velocity metrics, you can see the amount, how long something took. But it'll be shaded. It'll be like a darker color for work that was in an active state versus work that was in a wait state or an idle state. And so, the poll came up. Oh, I can't.
How are you going to get distracted by that visual?
Yeah, except for it won't let me vote.
Oh, because you're a panelist. Sorry.
All right. Okay. See, now there's a great example. My brain shifted to focus on that poll. And now I have to shift my focus because we can't focus on two things at once, which is what people have a really hard time struggling with, understanding resource utilization. Because resource utilization, the question is often, well, how long would it take you to do that? Well, I mean, I could do that in an hour, but that's not my highest priority right now. And for people who are on shared services teams and people who are, their knowledge, their skill set, their talent is needed to support multiple other teams or multiple projects, they're likely not going to be available when you need them to be. And so things will sit idle and wait. And that's the time that we want to capture. That's the visual that we want to, that I found to be effective in showing others, is that this request took so long, but 80% of that time, the work was in a wait state because that person wasn't available. Team A's priority isn't Team B's priority. Right?
Yeah.
And so I talked about, so one visual is to show the amount of wait time versus active time with work. And the other metric that's useful is flow efficiency. So we're comparing, we're looking at the ratio between wait time and work time. And that's often a very kind of advanced level metric to get close enough to be valuable. Oftentimes it's optimistically high, quite optimistically high, when in reality, maybe that might be 10, 15%, maybe up to 30, 35% if you ever, at the team level, if you have a really tight, cohesive team that's been working together for a while and things can move rapidly through, and they have all the skill set available to them, and they have good WIP limits. So I think those two visuals, if you can speak to visuals like that, data brings such credibility when you're trying to build a case to make your point. Although I do recognize that sometimes there's always, if there's leadership that doesn't like the data, then that's problematic. So just last night, I was leaning over my daughter's shoulder, who works for a large healthcare company. And she's a business analyst in sales, and she's the one who's analyzing the data and showing the reports for sales. And she's up late working on it, and she says, I'm building all this data, but yet they don't want to see it because it's not showing what they want to see. And so that's just a really tough nut if you're dealing with that situation. But I have found it to be very helpful in my line of work. Just grumbling and ranting and complaining about problems wasn't really helpful. But once I could start presenting data calmly, confidently, here's what the data is showing, and people might try and poke holes in it. And so then the idea isn't to be perfect. The data is never going to be perfect, but we're trying to make it be close enough to see the long-term trends, to be directionally correct. We're trying to be approximately right instead of exactly wrong. And so if you're getting pushback on, well, the data is dirty, or, what's the saying, garbage in, garbage out. But if you can, do some cleanup and then work to show what we're seeing with the data, what the data is telling us, and look at trends over the longer term, then I think that can be incredibly useful to build your credibility and to get people to start trusting the metrics a bit more.
Great. All right, we have a question over here on the Zoom. How can we display or measure our waiting time on a task without falling into time trackers and timesheets?
Yeah. So various tools have different ways for you to look at wait time. So for example, if you're using Jira, there's a flagged state that's available. So you have to probably have a conversation with the group at, what's the policy for flagging a story in JIRA. But whatever that is, you can flag that. And then you can set up like a horizontal column in JIRA for show me all the work that's in a wait state that's been flagged in a wait state, and make it easy for people to flag it. The block state, I tend to advise not using the block state, because we want to know what state the work is in when it gets blocked. And in JIRA, if you just use the block state, it ends up in this column all by itself called blocked. I mean, it's interesting, but we want to know where in the journey of this story through its value stream, where is it stuck? Where is it waiting? And so that's why flagged can be a little bit more useful. And then when that comes into a tool like Task Top, where you can model your different wait states or flags to wait in Task Top, then you can start to get that data. Other ways, if we have, sometimes it's a little bit challenging for companies to add a lot of wait states into their workflow, but there's probably a couple of wait states that you know about that would be really useful, and maybe you can build a case to, hey, let's add just a few more wait states in JIRA, because if you have a actual wait state there, then you can query that and you can show the work. Oh, okay, a lot of this work is waiting on verification, or this work is waiting for developers, and start to build the case. It's not that it's taking a long time in development. Development's not the bottleneck. It's really that developers are waiting on wireframes. And so we really need to explore the idea of how to elevate the designers and make sure their plates are cleared of unessential work, and provide designers with the tools and the support and the help that they need in order to flow faster.
Great. All right. Let's see. What role?
I just see somebody, if you use Azure DevOps, I'm just curious if you use Azure DevOps, you can color code your work item to show up as red, and it stays in its state column on your. Oh, okay, that's good to know. Thank you, Robin.
Nice advice. Thanks, Robin. All right, next question. What role does the way IT work, project-based temporary teams, is currently organized contribute to the prevalence of time thieves? While Kanban offers a way of surfacing the time thieves, it doesn't provide the guidance on how work should be organized to minimize the presence of time thieves. So this is my second question. Do you have suggestions on how IT work can be organized at different layers, technology, architecture, funding, team setup, etc., to address the structural issues that contribute to the presence or increased presence of time thieves?
Yeah. So managing work by project hugely contributes to time theft, because projects come and go, and that means that you're bringing people, and people are considered as resources. They're considered as fungible resources instead of knowledge workers who are masters at what they do. So we know that keeping a long-term, long-standing group of professionals together working in a product-centric way of working removes many of the problems that arise if we're working within projects, because projects come and go and people get pulled off from here to there, and we have more handoffs and more dependencies. When you're bringing up a new project, now you got to pull together a team, and you got to pull people from here. So they may be the necessary talent may be finishing up a project at the same time they're starting up a new project. So now they're having to focus in two different areas. And there's conflicting priorities there. So if we're managing work by product, we can keep all of that knowledge um, in within one group, one team, within a product, and they're long lived. So they're not handing that work off to run away to go work on another project. And then we can start funding by product. I think the funding approach, the budgeting, the funding, the accounting approach is one of the biggest deterrents or contributes to additional time thieves. Because if you're on an annual funding cycle, if you have to know everything and plan everything in 2020 to get something, to work on something in 2021, I mean, we don't know everything. New things will pop up. And so funding by product and then looking at that funding on a quarterly basis or having a pool for that product team to pull from when they learn new information, when they recognize through experimentation that what the approach that they thought they were going to take needs to shift. And now we need to do this other thing. And so we're going to need more funding for that. They're not screwed at that point. They'll have the ability to get funding. So I think between the funding model that's in place and whether, and if they're doing project versus product ways of working, those two things are the biggest two contributors that we're now starting to see a big shift. We look at some of the DevOps talks from DevOps Enterprise Summit, and we start to see a lot of talks now on the funding model, a lot of articles being written now on how critical it is to change the funding model. And I think I heard Jean even say that we need to get a CFO at the next DevOps Enterprise Summit to talk about how they're changing their funding models to support the business needs of delivering features faster.
Yeah, we've been hearing that so much. One of the big misses right now is the funding model is one of those things that's keeping everyone back. I guess it's one of those big challenges that no one's broken through quite yet.
Yeah, huge challenge.
Yeah. Okay, next question. Let's see. What are some notable things you learned from the process of writing this book?
Well, it's quite a journey. I thought I could write the book in 6 months. What I learned is the need for focus and heads down time. What I learned that I used Pomodoros to finish writing the book so I could have focused time. I learned that, and I'll talk about that in just a second. Remind me if I forget, Leah.
Okay.
And I learned that writing a book requires lots and lots of reading and research. So I probably spent more time reading and researching than I did writing. And that writing a book is a tremendous effort. Oh my gosh. And it starts out for me with these ideas and then just refining, and it's like continuous improvement on these ideas and continuously sort of refining them and adding examples. I know a lot more, some of my most favorite books and talks and speakers are those who write very simply and clearly and give examples. And that's not as easy to do as it sounds. So I spent a lot of time refining ideas and coming up with examples. If I didn't have any in my own back pocket, then reaching out to others to look for specific examples to help make the point I was trying to make. And so it was taking a long time. It had been a year. I still didn't have the manuscript done. And so I started doing Pomodoros. Pomodoros is a kind of tomato sauce, but it is also a type of a method to focus And I use a timer. I don't use my phone. I use like an old kitchen timer that has the sound to it. I set it for 25 minutes. And that sound allowed me, I still use it. Today, it's tremendously valuable. It's just heads down, focus to finish this one little thing. And I have 25 minutes. I'm going to finish this drawing. I'm going to finish this paragraph, whatever it is. And I've turned the sound off on Slack. I'm not going to look at email. I'm not going to look at my phone. I'm just going to focus on that. And I do admit, like, you're supposed to put your pencil down after 25 minutes, but sometimes that's right when I'm in the deepest thought and I want to finish that. And so I'll run over. But having a quiet space to work in when writing a book is really critical for me, to avoid interruptions and avoid the noise. And I know that's quite challenging, especially during the pandemic, and you got kids at home and pets who need attention and meals to cook and dishes to do. But just carving away, I found early in the morning to be the highest probability of not being interrupted when people are still sleeping. So I started to become a real early bird and getting up at 5 a.m. and getting a lot of writing and thinking done during that time because I wasn't interrupted.
I have a follow-up question to that, because I've been playing with your balanced work calendar and things, trying to set aside more time for, I work on the editing of our books as well as marketing and doing things like this. And editing requires that deep focus time without all the interruptions. So I've been trying to block off time. But then in the world of today with Slack and all this like instant, everyone expects you to be kind of instantly available. Like I've experienced those moments where you turn everything off and you're deep in thought and then you come back and people are like, have you seen this? Did you do this? And so how do you balance setting that time aside, but also everyone else's expectations?
Yeah. Socializing it.
Yeah.
And
combating that feeling of guilt, like, oh, I should have been paying attention to all these things while doing that.
Yeah. So if you're going to get the work of your life done, you have to ruthlessly protect your time.
I love that quote in the book. I forget who it's from.
Yeah. And then socializing that with people that you work with to let them know that I need creative time. So writers, developers, designers, we call those creative people who need large amounts of uninterrupted time to go deep into the complex work that they're doing. And carving out some do not disturb hours on your calendar and socializing that with your teammates, with your boss, across the organization. And I've seen it where that actually evolves into policies within teams, within departments and organizations where, and it depends on time zone and whatnot, but you're going to have these chunks, 90 minutes to 2 hours on specific days, like no meetings during that time. I mean, unless you're working with you're pairing with somebody, co-editing.
Sure.
And so I think that's the most critical, because then people understand why you're not going to respond for another 2 hours, or you might not respond until noon or something, and set that expectation so you don't. The guilty thing, it's human nature.
Right.
It's human nature. We want to be valuable. We want to be a team player. We want to support people. We want to be needed. And we're valuable. And so we want to help others out. But recognize that if you don't have a window to focus in on your own I would say don't assume that somebody else's request is more important than you finishing your thing.
Right. That's a good point. I like the idea of socializing it. It's very easy to make rules for ourselves with how we're going to work or whatever. But if you don't socialize that, how can you really expect anyone else to respect your rules if they don't even know them? So yeah, I like that advice. All right, let's see. This is an interesting question. Are you getting any dissenting feedback, others who disagree with you from the book? I'd be interested in what opposing views are being shared with you and your responses to them.
No, I wish I got more dissenting views. As humans, I think it's a challenge to get real critical, constructive feedback, and I haven't had a lot on the book. I did get some from reviewers who we sent the manuscript to, and I remember one from Mark Schwartz who cautioned me with Time Thief Unplanned Work, and I've taken his advice on it to be sure that when we talk about unplanned work, we're careful not to say that, there was this change in direction on the business side, and now I have to do this. Like, that's unplanned, because we want to allow for. There's always going to be change in what we're doing, and some things, if we don't get it out fast enough, now it becomes obsolete, and so we have to change something, the design, or get a new feature out, and we need to be able to adapt to that change quickly. So defining unplanned work became really important, and it still does today when I do workshops. And unplanned work is the topic. The first thing we do is spend a lot of time defining what that means, because who is it unplanned for? Maybe I didn't know about it, but Tom knew about it 3 weeks ago. And so who is it unplanned for?
Right.
And is it just really more of a communication issue that people be, if it's a surprise, if we can't anticipate what's headed our way, then that's problematic, and that's what we need to work on. So what other things have people disagreed with that are in the book? I had somebody in the book I put in Deming's Plan, Do, Check, Act, Kanban board design. And I had somebody bring up a good point on that really we're doing that for each state that the work is in. So with some of the board designs, they're always changing. We just really want them to accurately reflect the way that people work. And one of the arguments that I've gotten into has been around that their workflow and their tool set, their tool chain doesn't accurately reflect the way that they work, but it's the way that they want to work. But if it doesn't accurately reflect the way you currently work, then your data is going to be off. It's hard to get from point A to point B if you're not starting from an accurate position. And I'm just sort of drawing a blank. Let me think about that one some more. I wish I would invite people to send me differences of opinion and other ideas on the concepts that I write about, but most people just tend to be very polite and say that they like the book.
Good. Well, and I think it just resonates. So that's a good point. When you're not seeing a ton of negative or contradictory feedback, it really is showing you that it resonates with lots of people. Okay, next question. Have you seen successful strategies for getting leadership to adopt WIP limits? I've been trying to get my leadership to adopt limits for the number of major projects in progress at the same time, but they insist it isn't possible.
Yeah, I hear that. You said the word projects, right?
They did say projects, which is
Yeah,
from
yeah.
Andy.
Or, projects, initiatives, things. So when I hear, first of all, there's always going to be objections to the work that we're doing. And I think every good objection has a valuable or worthwhile objective to consider, because do we really think that people won't have opinions based on how they've based on their background, their experiences, what they know how to do? And so the objections are a way for us to really put some objectives together to counter that, and to come up with really good arguments for these objections. And when people want to pile on more work than the team has capacity to do, why is that? Because they want to get started on projects earlier so that they have any chance of being completed earlier. And I'm reminded of the story about Steve Jobs, and there's videos out there, and you could send these to people. They're short, but Steve Jobs gained a lot of respect, and it was one reason that Apple was so successful, was that they killed lots of really great ideas so they could focus on the couple that they wanted to do that year. And so instead of doing 13 initiatives this year, Jobs is saying, we're going to do 2. We're going to do 2, and we're going to do them really well. And so there's a lot of, that's a very powerful message to make. Most people recognize that if we're trying to juggle too many balls at once, something's going to drop. But prioritizing, clear prioritization comes in here, and looking at the 1 or 2 most important things for you to finish today, this week, this month, this year at the organizational level. If the list is too long, that in order to do something well and to do it as quickly as possible, we need to focus on that. If we have a really long to-do list, and then we're probably focusing on everything else. We're focusing on everything, and our brains can really only focus on one thing at a time. We might be, I can walk and talk at the same time, but I can't. You don't want your heart surgeon gossiping with somebody else while they're doing surgery on you. So the more challenging, the more complex the thing is, the more dedicated, focused time we need. And there's all kinds of research out there that you can use, that you can bring in to make your case, as well as tell the Steve Jobs stories to help out with that. And getting out of project mode and going into product mode will be a great help there too.
Great. I see someone has mentioned to the panelists if we could post the links on the Steve Jobs videos. We'll look for those right after this, and I'll post them into Slack. We have one more question.
Well,
yeah.
Just so it's also a really long. It's a good article on HBR about. I'll send it to you, Leah. It's an HBR article, and the title was, how to deal with difficult leaders. And one last comment on that is that there were people at Apple who stood up to Steve Jobs and made their case. And it turns out that the people who are doing that, it takes a lot of courage to stand up to people like Steve Jobs or your boss's boss who's saying you have to do this. But the people who are standing up and making a point, making a case for not taking on too much whip, those are the people that are getting promoted, because the boss knows that they can go to that person's going to tell them the truth. that person's gonna, not everybody wants everybody to say yes all the time. Just like giving feedback. I'd really like to go talk to somebody who's going to give me some good critical feedback instead of just telling me I'm doing a good job. And bosses are the same way too. They're going to value, if you look in the DevOps community, it's the people who have put their careers on the line and made a case and stood up for why we need to go, why we need to do continuous improvement, why we need to have dojos to train people on pipeline automation. It's often those people who are the ones that are getting the promotions. And if that still doesn't work, then maybe it's not a good fit for you in the organization.
That's always a possibility, right?
Yeah.
I think we have time for just one last question here. There's one in the Q&A here on Zoom, so I'll ask that one. In my personal experience, one of the major time thieves was to work on unnecessary things, not the right things to work on, which could become unused features for a developer, or not well-scoped, qualified work. Could this be another time thief?
Say that again. What?
Basically, I think Patrice here is asking if working on unnecessary things could be a time thief, the things that don't actually end up adding value at the end.
Yeah, I would probably put that under conflicting priorities, because your number one priority should be you shouldn't be working on unnecessary things. That'd be my question. It could be that unnecessary things are the easy ones that you can do, or you have the knowledge to do them. But why are we working on unnecessary things instead of the most important thing that needs to get done? The thing that when we finish it is going to help everything. It's going to rise all the other ships. It's going to make everything else move simpler. I have to ask myself that, why do I work on unnecessary things? First question is, what is an unnecessary thing? Leah, what's an unnecessary thing?
Well, I mean, I guess sometimes for myself, you have a huge list, right? We always have these huge lists of things to do, and they're the things there that are important and a priority, but they're difficult, or we know they're gonna be a challenge, or maybe we just don't enjoy that task. And so sometimes I'll basically procrastinate by jumping on all these other easier tasks first.
Oh, well, yeah,
I know I do that, and it's kind of working on the unnecessary things. They're things that could get done, but really they're not necessary.
Sometimes we call that work born in doing, where work sort of jumps the queue. I wonder if it's just easier on the mind. Maybe there's smaller tasks that you can bang out quickly, and the boost that we get from
like a bunch of quick wins, right?
We finish something. It feels so good. I just want to finish something today. And so even if it's not this high priority or as important as some of the other work, like, God, I got it finished today. Or
make that check mark in my list, and it just feels so good.
Or it was something that was relatively easy. Maybe it was soothing because I knew how to do this thing, and that felt good. Because this other new stuff over here, I don't know quite how to do that yet. I got to think about that for a while. Or maybe I just had 15 minutes. I'm not going to dive into something complicated if I just have 15 minutes or even 30 minutes. It's not time to get into it. But if there's this quick little thing here that maybe it's unnecessary, but I can finish it before my next call, so I'll do that.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. And then as I'm seeing people chat in the chat, it comes back to prioritization, right? Articulating what is the most important thing.
And breaking your work up into small enough chunks, small batch size, so that you can finish things within a window. If things are too big, then that's a problem. Big batch size, big problem.
Great. Dominica, I think that's all we have time for today. I really want to thank you for giving us your time and your wonderful advice and experience. For everyone on the call, we will be posting this on Slack so you can view later. We'll find some of those links that Dominica mentioned and we'll post those on the Slack. And join us again on the 22nd for our second and last AMA with Dominica.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for your
Thank
questions.
you so much.
Bye-bye.